that's a little breezy. I'll turn that down. Whoa, dude. Oh, bring that closer. Yes, new location, new light. Look, with the books behind me. Wait, is that it? Yes, and one of the many Nellie dolls. Hi! Yes! I'm late. Late's terrible. It's after 1:30. Oh, like, it's not really a puppet. It's crocheted, but you can sort of make it a puppet. Oh, my body fell off. Look, it's sort of kind of a puppet-ish. There we go. Hi. Hello. So I'm here. Yes, and I have a bonnet. Here's the bonnet. Why do I sing? New location. Okay, so yes, we have a slightly new location. We will be scooting this around like mad. I've been rearranging the furniture. Has anyone had that happen to them? That the whole pandemic thing, if you're staying home a lot, that you find yourself rearranging the furniture? It's like a thing. So yes, I'm rearranging the living room, and it's great. Well, because you have so much, like I said, the production stuff of shooting the show at one end of the living room and sitting there, and then we have to have, like, you know, the place where you just sit on the couch and watch TV. So I'm sort of separating them out into like zones: the sit and watch TV, relax, eat something zone, and the pack up a bonnet, produce a show zone. So there'll be some separation and sanity to the insanity. It's making sanity out of insanity. That's what we do. That is our job. Try to make sanity out of insanity. Order out of chaos. That's basically the deal over here. And now with the new kitten, it's just like bananas. Oh, she's so cute. Yes, the kitten, Morticia and Roswell are... Well, Roswell loves Morticia, and they sleep on the bed together and stuff, but Morticia's still like, ugh, I wanted a pony. But there you go. So today is August 4th. It's Tuesday. It's August 4th, which is National Coast Guard Day. Very important. You don't be stuck out there in the ocean. You want there to be a Coast Guard. Yay. Oh, it's National Night Out Day. First Tuesday in August is date may differ based on location due to extreme weather conditions in August. Check with local organizations for days near you. Your results may vary. Yes, National Night Out Day. Maybe not so much this year. I don't know. Or maybe it's National Out, like, on your sidewalk. Oh, someone's saying you get depressed. I know the feeling. I know that it does get hard. It does get hard to do anything. I think we should have National Night Out. I mean, just go out, like, you know, on your sidewalk or on your porch, or like get in the car and find a restaurant that does takeout and drive by and pick up some food and then sit outside. And there you are. Then you've patronized a restaurant. You're sitting out in your yard, and it's awesome. But you know what today is? And I know things are hard, but you cannot be depressed today, because today, I do not lie, is National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day. It is National... Oh, do we have smell-o-vision on this thing? Can you smell this? It is National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day. And yes, I knew it was coming. I had milk and cookies. And so last night, I did. I had so many things to do, but I was running around, and I said to him, gotta bake cookies. He went, what, in the middle of what? And now you have to bake cookies? Wait, what? I go, tomorrow is National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day. And I have to bake cookies, because I am totally... And they're really good. Now, I don't put nuts in mine. I've done it, like, once. It's pretty good. But generally... I like my nuts with my nuts and my chocolate chips with my chocolate chips. Kind of like those people separate their food on the plate. So yes, these are chocolate chip cookies that I made last night. That's pretty good. Yes. Yes, milk. Yay. Also good. And butter and sugar and more sugar, brown sugar, and sugar, and flour, and eggs, and chocolate chips and vanilla. And yeah, baking soda. That's the thing. They're good. And they really did. They came out chewy. Now the trick with these is the right kind of cookie sheet and the temperature. almonds. I haven't done almonds in my cookies. Somebody's asked about almonds. The trick is, they're those super, super, super shiny ones, and I tried them, and they get too dark. They get like dark on the bottom, like. So these are the medium shiny, not the black cookie sheets, not the super shiny reflective ones. The sort of medium matte finish, grayish shiny ones, and this seems to do the job. The other is, so they're brownish but not dark. My oven runs really hot. I gotta get a new oven. My oven runs way too hot. It's like crazy. And I had them look at it because it was like the pilot light wasn't going on. And they said, oh, it runs hot. It says, set your oven for 375. Yeah. And my cookies burned in like 4 minutes. They were like black. I was like, yeah, I don't think 375. So I watched the temperature. Sometimes the cookie recipe, it may be a little hot. It says 375. Try 350. See how it goes. But my oven runs hot. I can't set it for 375. These things would explode. So I lower the temperature. Took them out just a few seconds sooner. And they're chewy. So much better. Very good. All right, now, we actually, yesterday ended with the last day of the Laura Ingalls I'm in an incredibly bad mood, PMS, I hate everyone diary. She finally reached Mansfield. She was so happy because she'd been in the wagon for weeks, and her temperature reports kept saying 109, 120, 115. It was 1,000,000 degrees, and she was hot and miserable. My favorite was, I lost the thermometer, and just then we didn't know how hot it was. But she was miserable, and everywhere they went to, well, this seems like a nice town, but the people are shiftless, and they're foreigners and Russians. It's like, okie dokie. So yeah, she was a little weird, and she was in a bad mood, and she kept insulting. I said right away in the first chapter, she talked about the people that had many children and many pigs, and I couldn't tell the difference. I was like reading the Mrs. Oleson diary. It was terrible. So she finally finished snapping at people and has arrived in Missouri, to her great, great relief. So I imagine she cheered up enormously. Already it rained, and she got like much better mood. So now she did it. She's in Mansfield, Missouri. So now Rose is back. So I don't know if this is going to get better or worse. Because remember, Rose has quite the temperament. Rose is rather persnickety, if I may say so. She said, a lot of the things when you read Rose's stuff, people go, dude, what's with Rose? What is that about? And it's like, yeah, well, apparently her and Laura like cats. They're like cats. They got along sometimes. They adored each other. It's the Carrie Fisher, Debbie Reynolds thing. It totally is. It's postcards from the edge, 1800 style. Yeah, it's Debbie Reynolds, Carrie Fisher is Rose Wilder and Laura Ingalls Wilder, because they were inseparable, and they adored each other, and Rose was very involved in Laura's writing of the books and getting it published and keeping the flame going with these other things. But at the same time, the criticism that they have found in writing, not to mention what they said verbally when they thought nobody was listening, about each other, the things they said about each other was like, whoa, yikes. So yeah, they had their moments. So it was a volatile, exciting relationship, and you think history's boring, haha. So section 3. Here my mother's record ends. 50 years later, I began casually to speak to her of our camp in those vanished woods. And I remember Rose was a little girl, and she was on this trip, and her memories of it was great. There was like swimming and stuff. To speak of our camp in those vanished woods, and she stopped the words in my mouth with a fierce, I don't want to think of it! And yet, Rose has published this. Okay, I do not remember how many days my father spent hunting for land that secret $100 bill would buy. Remember the $100 bill, and then they couldn't find it, and it was a disaster. Every morning he rode away with some land agent to limp up and down the hills and come back at evening, nothing found yet. Paul and George and I were joyous. After the long boredom of so many dull days that we hardly remembered to smet, now every day was Sunday, without Sunday's clean clothes and staid behavior. The camp was a Sunday camp. The coolies' wagon on one side, ours on the other, and in the grove between them, the table and chairs were set and the hammock hung in the shade. They had a hammock. The kids loved it. That's why the kids were like, what? Rosa's like, well, it was a great time. We went swimming. We had a hammock. It was fat. It's today's bonnet. It's pale pink with little tiny flowers on. Yeah, she's like, it was great. It was swimming. There were hammocks. There was camping. What's the deal? We didn't have to go to work or school. The camp stove stood a little way apart over cooling ashes. Farther away, the horses were tied under the trees, and behind the wagons were screened places for our Saturday baths. We must stay within sight, or at least within hearing, if our mothers called us, but as soon as morning tasks were done, we were free to play in the woods. All day we climbed trees, picked berries, ate unripe walnuts and hazelnuts cracked between two stones. We startled rabbits that we must not chase far, and watched squirrels and birds, beetles and anthills. The hot air was full of good smells of rotting logs and dusty weeds, damp underneath of mats of last year's oak leaves. Whoa. Dandelion stems curled bitter on my tongue's tip, and the green curls wilted over my ears. So she was having a great old time. She was running around the forest and playing with the animals. Oh, wow. Oh, good cookie. Yummers. Sharp, flat stones were thick underfoot. We stubbed our toes on them, and all our big toes were wrapped in rags. Stone bruises on our summer callous heels didn't stop our running. We found toadstools and mosses, like teeny tiny forests, flat greenish gray, lichen on rocks, little perfect skins of locusts, ew, empty, thin and brittle, clinging with tiny claws to the bark of trees. Ew, I have to sneeze now, wait. There we go. Excuse me. Skins of locusts, what they shed their skins. I say that's gruesome. Okay. We picked up strange stones. When I showed my father a thin triangular one, wavy all over and sharp-pointed, he said it was an Indian arrowhead. We collected dozens of them, and Paul found a stone axe head. One day I had to stay in camp with Mrs. Cooley. I must mind her and not go out of her sight. My father had found a place. My mother was going with him to see him, and they wanted no worry about me while they were gone. There never had been such a long morning. Now remember she did this opening chapter where my mother had a $100 bill in the writing desk, and I must never, never, never tell anyone where it is. We never heard about the $100 whole trip. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, go on. Fine. There never had been such a long morning. I was embarrassed, and so was Mrs. Cooley. Oh, I guess she felt she was too big a girl to have a sitter. When at last I saw the team coming, my father and mother coming back, I felt like exploding. I could hardly be still and not speak until spoken to. My father was glowing, and my mother shining. She never had talked so fast. Just what they wanted, she told Mrs. Cooley. So much, much more than they'd hoped for. A year-round spring of the best water you ever drank, a snug log house in woods on a hill, only 1.5 miles from town, so Rose could walk to school and to camp all, just think, 400 young apple trees, heeled in, all ready to set out when the land was cleared. They'd bought it. As soon as dinner was over, they were going to the bank to sign the papers. We were moving out that afternoon. Okay, so Laura is finally happy. She found the house. She's ecstatic. And then it's they're in Mansfield, the apple orchards and the old log house. Ta-da! So this is the place. So Rose is like, okay. When he was excited, my father always held himself quiet and steady, moving and speaking with deliberation. Sometimes my quick mother flew out at him, but this day she was soft and warm. My quick mother flew out at him. So Laura was like violently irrational. So apparently Laura was temperamental and like just like laying into Almanzo all the time. Rose is like, oh yes, my mother would start screaming at him, but she was nice today. It was a shock, yeah. She left him eating at the camp table, told me to clear it and wash the dishes when he was through, and went into the screen place to get ready to meet the banker. I perched on a stump and watched her brush out her hair and braid it. She had beautiful hair, rowan brown, very fine and thick. Unbraided, it shimmered down to her heels. To her heels! It's like Crystal Gale hair. Laura Ingalls had Crystal Gale hair to her heels. But it's bright, that's it. But of course, she was what? 5 foot? 4'11"? Tiny, tiny, so it would have been to other people's, hips. Wow. Down to her heels. It was so long that when she tightly braided it, she could sit on the braids. Usually it hung down her back in one wide braid, but when she dressed up, she must put up her hair and endure the headache. How do you put up your hair if your hair is literally down to your ankles? And when you braid it, you can sit on the braids. You wrap those, it would be like this. If you did Princess Leia braids, they would be literally out to here. How did she... Now she wound the braid around and around into a big mass on the back of her head and fastened it with her tortoiseshell pins. She fluffed her bangs into a soft little mat in front, watching her comb in the small looking glass fastened to a tree. And suddenly I realized that she was whistling. I remembered that I hadn't heard her whistling lately. Whistling girls and crowing hens always come to some bad ends, she'd say gaily. She was whistling always. She whistled like a bird, whistling a tune, clear and soft, clear and sweet, trilling, chirping, or dropping notes one by one as the meadowlark drops them from the sky. I was pleased to hear her whistling again. Aw, see, she got to Missouri and she cheered up. Whistling, she buttoned up her new shoes with the button hook. She took off her calico dress and folded it neatly, standing in her bleached muslin petticoats and corset cover trimmed with crochet lace. She took her best dress, her black cloth wedding dress, out of the box in which it had traveled from Dakota. Whistling, "Oh, Susanna, don't you cry for me." How do you do? She put on the skirt and smoothed the placket. I was sorry that the skirt hid her new shoes. She coaxed her arms into the basque's tight sleeves and carefully buttoned all the glittery jet buttons up its front to her chin. With her gold pin, she pinned the fold of ribbon, robin's egg blue, to the front of the stand-up collar. Then the very last thing, the climax. She pinned on her black sailor hat with a blue ribbon around the crown and the spray of wheat standing straight up at one side. The braids in black tilted the hat forward just a little in front. The narrow brim rested on the mat of bangs. Now, she had huge hair. She's only this little tiny thing, and she has enough hair to reach her ankles, and it's all braided, and then there's a hat on top. Would that have looked a little strange? Maybe the hat balanced the whole thing? I don't know, but she had like thick hair. She looked lovely. She was beautiful. Now, see here, 1 minute Rose is going on about how her mother is like flying off the handle at her dad, and she's like all upset. Now she's like, she looked lovely. She was beautiful. You could see my father thinks so when he came out and he looked at her. So now suddenly Rose is speaking adoringly of her. And half the time Rose is like, well, my mother. So it's like, these two are like on and off like a light here. She told them to hurry or they'd be late. But she spoke as if she were singing, not cross at all. She went into the screen place to change his shirt, and he went into the screen place to change his shirt and comb his hair and mustache, and put on his new hat. To me, my mother said that I could clear the table now, be sure to wash every dish while they were gone, and as usual, she told me to be careful, not to break one. I never had broken a dish. Just getting a little nutty here. I remember all this so clearly because of what happened. Dun, 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 dun. I had taken away the dishes and wiped the table. My mother put down under her clean handkerchief and her little red cloth pocketbook with her mother-of-pearl sides. She was wearing her kid gloves. Carefully, she brought the writing desk and set it on the table. They're going to the bank. She laid back its slanted upper half and lifted out the narrow wooden tray that held the pen and the inkwell. Now they've gotten dressed up. They're going to the bank to buy the house, to make the down payment. The $100 bill was gone. There was a shock, like stepping in the dark on a top step that wasn't there. But it could not be true. It was true. The place in the desk was empty. Everything changed. In the tight strangeness, my father and mother were not like them. I did not feel like me. They asked, had I told someone? No. Had I never said anything to anyone ever about the money? No. Had I seen a stranger near the wagon when they were not there? No. Or in camp? No. My mother said it wasn't possible. Not the coolies. My father agreed, no, not them. It must be there. My mother had seen it last in Kansas. They took every sheet of writing paper out of the desk and shook it. They took each letter out of its envelope, unfolded it, looked into the empty envelope. They turned the desk upside down and shook it, the felt-covered inside lids flapping. My mother said they were losing their senses. Suddenly, she thought, hoped, asked, had I taken it myself to play with? No, I felt scalded. She asked, was I sure? I hadn't just opened the desk sometime for fun? My throat swelled shut. I shook my head no. Don't cry, she said automatically. I wouldn't cry. I never cried. I know these people aren't, having issues at all. I never cried. She's like, what, 7? 4? I was angry, insulted, miserable. I was not a baby who'd play with money or open the desk for fun. Oh, yeah, here you go. I was going on 8 years old. She's 7, and she says, I never cry. Do you know any 7-year-old girls who never cry? She's going across the prairie, and she literally is 7, and she's already figured out how to never, ever cry. Oh, no. Oh, yeah, that can't be good for you. It's terrifying. I never cry. I was angry, insulted, miserable. Well, I was going 8 years old. I was little, alone, and scared. My father and mother sat there, still. In the long stillness, I sank slowly into nothing but terror. Pure terror, without cause or object. A nightmare terror. Okay, I think we're now getting the whole thing when people go, why was Rose so strange? Why was Rose so uptight? I think we're getting it. Rose is a little uptight. We're seeing why. She'd already been beaten out of crying by the time she was 7. And she's now having a complete nervous breakdown here. Finally, my mother said, well, she meant, no use crying over spilled milk. What can't be cured must be endured. Oh, I like that. What can't be cured must be endured. Well, I guess so. My father told her not to blame herself. It wasn't her fault. Carefully, she peeled off her thin kid gloves. She turned them right side out, finger by finger, smoothed them. She said she'd better go explain to the banker. Somehow, the worst was over when he tried to put it off, saying something might turn up, and she flared out that he knew as well as she did, nothing turns up that we don't turn up ourselves. Yeah, also true, if harsh. Things don't turn up that you don't turn up yourself. Then she told me to run away and play, and I remembered the unwashed dishes. She had forgotten them. For days, I don't remember how many days, everything was the same as ever, and not at all the same. I said nothing about the disaster. I didn't want to. My mother told Mrs. Cooley that they thought best to take time to make up their minds. My father looked for work in town. My mother knew nobody there. Mr. Cooley sold one of his teams and one wagon, and Paul and George were going to move into the hotel and help run it. I was going to say this like hotels again. I knew we could sell the horses, but what then? Covered wagons were going by every day, going both ways as usual, some camping overnight nearby. Often I tried to think what would happen when we had nothing to eat. I couldn't. Blackberries were fewer now and smaller. I was deep in the briary patch hunting them when my mother called, and called again before I could get out without tearing my dress or the clutching thorns and running over the sharp stones to the camp. My father was hitching up. My mother was putting last things into the wagon. They had bought the farm. What? She had found the $100 bill. I took a milk for that. Baba, how is this happening? I'm freaking out here. How did this happen? In the writing desk. Wait, what? Okay. Have you ever had that happen? Where you lose something insanely important, I don't know, you're about to buy a house and you have your entire down payment in a box and it's suddenly not there. That would be bad. You lose a check, something insanely important, and you look and you look and you know you put it there and it's just not there. It's just not there. And you go insane. and then 3 days later you find it where you put it. Oh yeah, I'm making nuts. So what in the world? So in the desk, wait, they were in that covered wagon. The jolting had slipped it into a crack in the desk, and I was to stop asking questions and get into the wagon. You'd think there'd be a little celebration. You'd think there'd be a moment. I mean, nowadays, parents, after all that crises, after freaking out and scaring the kid, nowadays parents would say, hey, great news, we found the money, it's okay. It was in the thing, it fell in a crack. You didn't take it, we know you didn't take it, we know you didn't play with it. Aren't you happy we found it? Hey, that's what people would do now. But she's like, well, we found it, get in the wagon. It's just like harshness everywhere. Yikes. Get in the wagon. Just as she was, my mother had found my father and gone to sign papers. They didn't dress up. This time they didn't dress up. They just got in the wagon. Just as she was. My mother had found my father and gone to sign the papers, and just as I was, without even washing my feet, I was to obey her and get up onto that wagon seat. Now, and no more words about it. The town began with 2 small houses on a side road into the woods. There were 2 big houses with large yards with trees, and a cunning little low house right at the edge of the gravel sidewalk. On the other side of the road, opposite the little house, stairs went up the side of the hotel where Paul and George would live. In front of the hotel was the square, with trees in it and lines of hitching posts around it, except on the far side where the railroad track was. We were driving along Main Street, and it was on one side of us, and in front of us, and behind us too. It went around 3 sides of the square. 3 solid rows of stores behind 3 high-board sidewalks. This was the gem city of the Ozarks. We passed a big Reynolds General Store with 2 large windows full of things, the door between them. Men were loafing, whittling, talking, and spitting. Ew. Spitting along the high boardwalk. There were small stores, the Bank of Mansfield, a Boston racket store with Opera House painted on the window upstairs, Hoover's livery stable and horses in a feedlot, then another big house inside a wire fence. Wow. Past the blacksmith shop, the dusty road went downhill to cross a little bridge. The long hillside was orchard and pasture, but houses began where the road went up again beyond the bridge. In all, there must have been a dozen houses in fenced yards with gates behind paths through the weeds on both sides of the road. It's kind of a big town. All the houses had front porches. All were painted and trimmed with different colors and wooden lace. Behind them were vegetable gardens, clotheslines, barns, and chicken houses. Some had pig pens. 2 had an upstairs. One of these had a bay window and a cupola. Behind the houses on our right was the railroad embankment. Behind those on the left, 2 more houses and a high grassy hill against the sky. At the top of the road's long climb stood the schoolhouse, where I would go to school. It stood square, 2 stories high, with windows all around, and its bell tower up above the double doors. All beyond it was woods. It was in the edge of the woods, but not a single stump remained on the grounds, trodden bare and hard about it. A well beside it. Behind it a woodshed and 2 privies, boys and girls. This is the first time anyone's mentioned the outhouse. No one has mentioned the outhouse till now. 9 books. Nobody mentioned an outhouse. And finally, they're in town. And Rose says, and the privies. Hi, outhouses. Yes, schools had bathrooms. Just like now, they had a boys' and a girls' privy outhouse. There we go. Good cookies. I looked as long as I could, but the road turned away from the schoolhouse to follow the railroad track. The wheel tracks went beside the iron rails with a row of poles holding a telegraph wire on glass knobs above them. A telegraph wire. Like I said, they're in modern times, a telegraph wire. There were 2 houses in the woods, then the road turned into the woods and left the railroad behind us. Now there was nothing but woods on either side, and the 2 wheel tracks went straight and slowly downward. Oops, sorry, crashing about here, and we don't even have the cat to do it. Between them and stumps and big rocks, the wagon jolted and lurched over rocks in the dust, and the horses' iron shoes clattered on them. From the talk over my head, I learned how lucky it was that the last cent had just been enough to pay for the salt pork and cornmeal. We could make out all right now, selling wood, and do well when the apple trees were in bearing. Paying off the mortgage would be easy then. $300 at 12%, pounded every 3 months. I guess that's compounded. They just said pounded every 3 months. Why would they be pounded, I wondered. Sounds odd. My mother could do the arithmetic in her head. They ought to be able to carry it if they kept their health. So that's wild. That's $300 at 12%. 12%? Can you imagine a mortgage of 12%? Okay, hella 1980s. 12%. Like a credit card. Even then or later, I learned from such talk that some very foolish man had bought all those little apple trees from a smart salesman, though he had no cleared land. When they came into their bundles, he had no clearing to set them out in, but he had signed papers, so he had to mortgage the land to pay for them. Then he just gave up. Between 2 days, he left the land and the cabin and little apple trees root buried in a trench, and the mortgage. So my father and mother got them from the banker. A foreclosure deal. That's why they got a deal on the house. They bought a place in foreclosure, and the guy had all these trees he didn't take with him. Cool, okay. Because it was the panic of 1894, which was like worse than the Great Depression. So there you go. The road went up again. It seemed to go almost vertically up a long, long hill, but my father turned the horses away from it onto a fainter track in a valley. Beside us now, a stream of water as clear as glass ran over flat ledges and through shallow shadow pools. In a little while, the wagon tracks turned to ford a pool. The horses stopped to drink, and my mother said, "Here we are." She asked me what I thought of it, but I saw nothing to think about. The creek came from our own spring, she told me. Across the creek, the woods went up a low hill in the yellow light of the sinking sun. The wheel tracks went down the curve of the creek, and the trees hid them. My father drove up the hill through the woods. The horses climbed clumsily, the flat rocks slipping under their feet. At the top of the hill, we came into a tiny clearing at the edge of a deep ravine, and there stood a little log house. Quick as a squirrel, I was down over the wheel and around the corner of the log's ends. A rough, thick door stood open. I was in the house. I was in a narrow little room, its floor of earth and dead leaves, but beyond a doorway was a larger room that had a wooden floor. It had a little entryway. That would be like where you take off your snowy boots and what, so that could be a dirt floor. This room was bare and clean. It smelled like the woods. Dead leaves were blown into corners. There was a big fireplace, and sure enough, as that woman had said, no windows. There was a square hole in the wall of peeled logs, an empty hole, but it had a rough wooden door hanging open, like a house door. Now, here's a picture of Rocky Ridge Farm in Mansfield after Almanzo had cleared a good deal of the land. Laura probably took this photo in 1910. And now I've been out there. That's the famous Rocky Ridge Farm where they have a museum and and if you go online, you can look up the Mansfield, Missouri, Laura Ingalls Wilder Museum there, and they have a very fancy museum now with pictures, great big museum, and they have a wonderful gift shop where they sell indeed the Missouri bonnets that I have shown you several times. There's a picture, there's a picture of the ground, and it's fancy. It's a lovely place. The cabin we lived in during the first winter in Mansfield, it was part of the barn where this picture was taken. The houses are the team which brought us down from Dakota. My father is sitting in a buggy for which he traded the hack when we were rich enough to have a wagon and a buggy. Oh, that's Laura. That's Laura. There she is. This photo of Laura was taken in the ravine just below the spring, which is quite pretty. Very nice dress. Okay. So Rose is in the house right now. So that's good. Nothing more was to be seen there, but I hadn't noticed that in the narrow room, the logs of the wall around the door were papered with newspapers. Large black letters and curlicues stopped me. I stood and read, Carter's Little Liver Pills. Did you know Carter's Little Liver Pills were that old? Do you remember Who remembers Carter's Little Liver Pills? But I don't think they have them anymore. But they had them as late as like the 1970s and 80s. They were still around. That's good. Yeah, I remember seeing Carter's little liver pills in the stores as a kid and going, seriously? But they changed them to Carter's pills when they realized that it was like patent medicine. It didn't do anything for your liver. I mean, it was like they were making stuff up. So they had to change the ads to say they were, it was like Geritol. It's like, well, it's a vitamin supplement thing. But Carter's pills, I still saw them in stores in the 70s and 80s. But no, I don't think they're around. But Carter's, 1895, little liver pills were all the rage. And a philosophical question, which I kept trying and failing to answer for so long afterward that I've never forgotten it. What is life without a liver? Well, there you go. But yet, Carter's little liver was supposed to be good for your liver. They didn't quite explain why, but that's how they sold them. That problem was too much for me for the moment. I was 7. I postponed the struggle with it. Outside, some chunks of bark had fallen from the house wall, and between all the logs was yellow clay, dry and hard and cracked to bits. Not far away, the path from the door went down, steeper than stairs, into the ravine. As usual, my mother called to me to be careful. The ravine was shadowy, darker in its narrow bottom. It ended in one huge rock as big as a big house. Behind the rock was a hollow sound of running water, and water ran from beneath it into a little pond as round as a washtub and half as deep. Ferns hung over the darling pool, and from a bough above it dangled a hollowed-out gourd for dipping out the water. I drank a delicious cold gourdful, looking up and up at the mountainside above the spring. It was all dark woods, only the very tips of the highest trees in sudden yellow light. All down the dark ravine the water chuckled eerily. Something moved stealthily in the leaves under the bushes. I clambered up the path as fast as I could. Oh, a neighbor's cabin. My father is pictured in it in his buffalo coat, which was made from the skin of a buffalo killed in Dakota. This is Almanzo by a house in cabin. Still funky. It's still very primitive. I don't know. Heavens. The horses were unhitched and picketed, the hens in their coop on the ground. I bet those chickens had been in a box strapped to the back of a wagon for like 4 weeks. I must be awfully glad to get out of there. The poor chickens. They finally let the chickens out. My father and mother were taking out things over the wagon's open-end gate. We would eat supper outdoors and sleep one more night in the wagon. My mother meant to scrub that cabin floor from top to bottom before we moved into it. Which is good, because it's like disgusting. We could still see well enough in the shadowy daylight, but inside the wagon was too dark to find things. My father rummaged for the lantern. He pressed the spring that lifted its thick glass globe and touched the match flame to the wick and carefully lowered the globe into place, and suddenly the lantern was shining in darkness. He held it up, looking for a place to hang it, and there in the edge of its light stood a strange man. The man's feet were bare. Oh no, that's been scaring him. His pants were patched over patches and torn. He was tall, thin, bony, and his eyes glittered from a bush of hair and whiskers. Okay, this is like not who you want to run into at like the middle of the night in your new house. Like, hi. He came a step nearer, and quick as a snake, my mother's hand slipped into the pocket where her revolver was. Laura's like, back off, bud. So, yeah, this man comes out, and Laura's like whipping out the gun. Oh, Lord. She waited ready. Slowly, my father said, hello there. The man said he wanted work. He was looking for a chance to work for something to eat. My father answered that we were just moving in, and as you could see, we didn't have work to give anybody. Too bad, but maybe better luck in town, just over the next hill, not much more than a mile to the west. You've got a good place here, the man said. He was bony but big. After a minute, my father said it would be a good place someday, he guessed. Then we all stood silent as if we couldn't move. The man began to talk quietly, slowly, almost dreamily. They had to get something to eat, he said. His wife and 5 children were down in the wagon by the creek. They had been traveling all summer looking for work. They could not go on any longer. This was the 3rd day they'd had nothing to eat. He had to get work, so he came up the wagon tracks. They couldn't go on without something to eat. He stopped. There was nothing more to say, nothing to do. Now I knew what happened. When you had nothing to eat, what happens is nothing. Suddenly, my father was talking and moving quickly, not deliberate at all. He said he needed help making wood, provided the man could come help him tomorrow. He'd divide what little, he was reaching into the wagon. At sight of the slab of salted fat pork, my mother cried out, "Manly, no, we've got rows!" Like, "Don't hand over the salt pork." He paid no attention. The butcher knife in his hand cut through the white meat. He opened a corner of the sack and poured cornmeal into a little tin pail. He was asking, did the man have a good axe? He said they'd start early at sunup, put in a good day's work, and if the wood sold, he'd treat the man right. Bring an axe if he had one. Be sure to bring back the pail. Oh, that's all right. Don't mention it. See you tomorrow. The man was gone into darkness. He had not said a word. Afterward, my mother always said what she expected. She expected never to see that vagabond again, nor her tin pail either. At the time, she said nothing. My father made the fire under the camp stove, and she cooked supper. We had fried salt pork and corn dodgers and slept in the wagon. The man woke us in the false dawn, bringing the tin pail and his axe. He was a better woodsman than my father. All that day, while my mother and I cleaned the house and lugged things from the wagon to put on the dry, scrubbed floor, they worked in the woods. They worked as long as they could see. Then my mother held the lantern, and they took the top and curtains off the wagon and stacked up high in it all the stove wood it would hold. Early next morning, my father set out to sell the wood in town. The man worked with a will while he was gone. He was gone all day. At night, he had not come. The strange man went down the hill. My mother lighted the lamp turned low to save the kerosene. Still, it was some time before we heard the wagon jolting. My mother lighted the lantern, then said, "I'd better take it to him." I rushed out with it. The wagon box was empty. I almost shouted, "Well, you sold it." "Phew, finally I did," my father said in triumph. "How much did you get for it?" I asked. He was beginning to unharness the horses. He bragged, 50 cents. I set down the lantern and ran into the house telling me, 50 cents! He sold it all for 50 cents! Her whole face trembled and seemed to melt into softness, and she sighed a long sigh. "Aren't you glad?" I exulted. "Glad? Of course I'm glad." She snapped at me to herself. "Oh, thanks be." I ran out again. I pranced out to tell my father how glad she was, and he said with a sound of crying in his voice, "Oh, why did you tell her?" "I wanted to surprise her." "Oh, Almanzo." See, what is it with like the women in this family and the men? Charles was the same thing. If Indians showed up or poor people showed up, Ma Ingalls was always, "I don't know. Well, we can't let them in the house and don't get them anything. And where's the gun?" And Pa was like, They just need food. They just give him some food. You want some cornbread? And would give people food and be nice to him. Sit there, smoke his pipe. He smoked his pipe when the Indians came. Hung out, smoked a pipe with them, gave him some tobacco, said bye. It was like they just smoked a peace pipe. It was fine. Here we are again. And here's Laura, who thought her mother was a bit uptight. And she's doing the same thing. Every time they run into strangers, this poor guy comes and she's like, "Well, don't give him anything. He won't be back. Harumph, harumph, harumph." But Almanzo, and remember, Almanzo didn't grow up poor. Almanzo came from money. Remember that book, Farmer Boy? They had so much food and they had money and a nice house. And Almanzo's like, "Give the guy some salt pork and some cornbread, and he can come and work in the morning, and it'll be cool." And sure enough, so Almanzo's really nice, and Laura's kind of harsh. So here's Rose trying to cheer everyone up. But poor Almanzo, I wanted to surprise her. "You do such things, little things, horrible, cruel, without thinking, not meaning to. You have done it. Nothing can undo it. This is a thing you can never forget." "Oh, geez, Louise. Honey, you're 7. Calm down. She's 7. He didn't tell her not to tell Ma. She's 7. He said, I sold the wood for 50 cents. He didn't say, surprise. She's 7. She went and said, hey, Pa sold the wood. And she said, oh, great. And she's talking about this like she's committed this unspeakable crime. She's been uptight for like weeks about the $100 bill that she didn't steal. Scary. How long that man worked with my father, I don't remember. I cannot remember his name, nor anything at all about his family camping down by the creek. Surely I knew these children. They must have been there for weeks. I remember that he and my father were roofing the little log barn the day I chased the rabbit. So they kind of had a Mr. Edwards. helping them out. I mean, stay, I guess, but they kind of had a guy helping out. They're giving food to, so there you go. So Laura would have run him off with a gun, and here clearly he helped put the roof on the house. The leaves had fallen from all the trees but the oaks then, and the oaks wore their winter red that day. There was light snow and frost underfoot, so cold it burned my bare feet, and my breath puffed white in the air. I chased that rabbit over the hills, up and down and back again, until exhausted, it hid in a hollow log. I stopped up the log's ends with rocks, and fetched both men from their work off the roof to chop out that rabbit and kill it. The day was Saturday. I was gone to school then. For Sunday dinner, we had rabbit stew. I guess they did kill it, poor little thing. But I hear it's good eating. There you go. Rabbit stew with gravy on mashed potatoes and on our cornbread. And on Monday, I found in my lunch pail at school one of that rabbit's legs. My mother had saved it and packed it with the cornbread and a little tin pail to surprise me. Blah. The man and his family must have gone on west or south early that winter. He must have earned provisions for the trip. I remember walking to school through the snowy woods in my shoes and stockings, hearing the thuds of my father's axe sounding fainter as I went, and coming home with the sunset red behind me to hear the whir, whir of the crosscut saw growing sharper in the frosty air. The axe was too heavy for my mother. My father would not trust her with its sharpness, but she could safely handle one end of the crosscut saw. I'm not sure that's why Almanza didn't let her have the axe. I'm just saying, what does the kitty cat say? Oh, here's. I think Almanzo kept the axe away from Laura because the same reason we would after reading this. I think he said, "Oh, honey, the axe is too heavy for you," and hid it because he was scared. Because I would hide the sharp objects with these people. Oh my God, we're almost. I'm tempted to do the whole thing. There's a bunch of pictures. This kind of goes on. All right. Because I should start a new book tomorrow, or should I try to finish this kookiness today? I don't know. Okay, that's pictures. That's all pictures. So, okay, it's only a couple pages. Okay, it goes on and on with its axes. Winter evenings were cozy in the cabin. The horses were warm in the little barn, the hens in the new wooden coop. Snow banked against the log walls, and long icicles hung from the eaves. A good fire of hickory logs burned in the fireplace. In its heat, over a newspaper spread on the hearth, my father worked oil into the harness straps between his oily black hands. I sat on the floor, carefully building a house of corn cobs. And my mother sat by the table, knitting needles flashing, while she knitted warm woolen socks for my father, and read to us from a book propped under the kerosene lamp. She read to us Tennyson's poems. Remember the book of Tennyson's poems? She was so excited. And Scott's poems. Those books were ours. And she read us Prescott's Conquest of Mexico, and Conquest of Peru, and The Green Mountain Boys, and John Halifax, Gentleman. She read us The Leather Stocking Tales, and another true book, the biggest of them all, Ancient, Medieval, and Modern History. Oh, what I wouldn't give for that, right? I borrowed those books from the shelves of lending books in the fourth reader room at school. The teacher let me borrow them, though I wasn't in fourth reader yet. Don't you want to look up all these books and go find copies and read the stuff that Laura read? I remember the Sunday afternoon when my father and mother planned the new house. We had got the cow that spring. I must have been 10 years old, going on 11. On Sunday afternoons in warm weather, when company wasn't spending the day with us, or we were not spending it in town with the coolies, my father and mother in their Sunday clothes went walking sedately over the land while I and mine minded the cabin. They had cleared 20 acres and set out all the little apple trees, and we had the cow Sunday afternoon when they decided where to build the house. They built their own final real house. From my swing in the oak tree by the cabin, Fido, the dog they picked up is still there good. Fido and I saw them standing and talking under the huge old white oak tree not far away. Yes, almost there. They talked a long while. Then my father went to lead the cow to water and change her picket peg, and my mother called me to see the spot where our house would be. I got to tell you, there's all this stuff about how much did Rose write of the books, how much did Laura write of the books. So we just read Laura's diary, and it was sort of awful, and she didn't really describe things, she just kind of complained. And now we're reading Rose's stuff, and although she has kind of hard attitude, she's describing things. So I think the two of them got in on it, on those books, because it doesn't sound like just one of them. It's hard to tell, but from her writing and Laura's writing, I don't think it was the one person, but it's a joint effort here. It would be under the great old white oak at the edge of the hill where we stood. Here the ground sloped more gently down into the ravine and rose steeply up the wooded mountain to the south. You could see the brook running from the widening mouth of the ravine and curving to the north and east around the base of the rounded hill. You could hear the water rippling over the limestone ledges. It was springtime. The hickory trees on the hill were in young green leaves. The oak leaves were pink, and all the flinty ground beneath them was covered with one blue-purple mat of dog's tooth violets. They're big on the violets one. Along the brook, the sarvis trees, I don't know what those are, blooming misty white. The ancient white oak was lively, with dozens of young squirrels whisking into and out of their nests in the hollow branches. My mother stood under it in her brown-sprigged white lawn dress, her long braid hanging down her back. Below the curled bangs, her eyes were purple blue. Oh, she was like Elizabeth Taylor. She had like violet eyes. Purple blue as violets. Laura Ingalls looked like Elizabeth Taylor. She had the dark hair and the purple violet eyes, and apparently the rather Irish Elizabeth Taylor temperament. It would be a white house, she said, all built from our farm. Everything we needed to build was on the land. Good oak beams and boards, stones for the foundation of the fireplace. The house would have large windows looking west across the brook over the gentle little valley up the wooded hills that hid the town to the sunset colors in the sky. There would be a nice big porch to the north, cool on hot summer afternoons. The kitchen would be big enough to hold a wood stove for winter and one of the new kerosene stoves that wouldn't heat up the place worse in the summer. Every window would be screened with mosquito netting. That's like a big deal. Okay. There would be a well with a pump just outside the kitchen door. No more lugging water from the spring. And in the parlor, there would be a bookcase. No, 2 bookcases. Big bookcases full of books. And a hanging lamp to read them by on winter evenings by the fireplace. You know, they've been talking about, like, back when it was Ma and Pa, they'd have, like, 1 book or 2 books. They had, like, a little handful of books. She's talking about filling out. So there's the little woodsy area there. That's Rocky Ridge, as it looks today, or in, I don't know, when this came out. This is, when I was a little girl in the Ozarks, I had a donkey whose name was Spookendike. What? So this is Rose and her donkey Spookendike. I am not making this up. Rose and the donkey. There's Rose. There's Rose. I love the facial expression. And Spookendike. Okay. So they're going on and on about this fabulous house they're going to build. Is it true? Is this true? When the mortgage is paid in only a few more years, she said, and when our orchard isn't bearing, if prices are good then, we will fence the whole place with wire and build the barn bigger. We'll have more stock by then, and after that, we can begin to build the house. She woke from the dream with a start, and, oh, goodness, it's chore time. I'd better take the milk pail to my father, she said, and feed the hens before they went to roost. Don't you forget to fill that water pan, and bring in the eggs, and be careful not to break one. Oh, now that we had the cow, we'd have a treat for Sunday supper. French toast with that wild honey to surprise my father. How wonderful it was to have a cow again. Remember the little house books? And they laughed because they had a cow. Amazingly, all of this carrying on about this house, she did, because she does build one. While I scattered corn for the hens, fetched the water from the spring to fill their pans, and hunted for eggs, in the broody hens hid in the haymow, in the straw stack, and even the wild grasses, I heard her whistling in the cabin, getting supper. Because now Ma is dreaming of her house. Laura is finally dreaming of this house, and Rose is like, oh, thank heaven, she's happy. Laura's dream was realized. The house that she and Almanzo built of materials from the farm. The well house is outside the kitchen door. The home is now preserved as a memorial museum by the Laura Ingalls Wilder Home Association of Mansfield. It's still there. You can go. Look. There at the back. I've been in it. It's the house. It is, that's that. It's there. It is the house. I have been in there. That seriously is the ending of that thing. I have been to the house. I've been to the house. It's lovely. But you know, it's tiny. It's by our standards. It's laid out nice, and there's upstairs and downstairs, but I don't think you can go upstairs still. Sometimes they have special tours upstairs. But you take the tour, and you go in, there's a living room, and there's the chair, and they don't let you sit on the chair. You like special thing if you pose for a photo, they let you sit on the chair for like a second because it's tiny and it's millions of years old. It's cute, but like the rooms are small by our standards, but like to keep them cool and keep them warm, you don't want too big a room. and the ceilings seem incredibly low. Now, Almanza was relatively tall-ish, but Laura was really short. And it seems, and the kitchen, everything's low. Because he built stuff so she could reach it. And a lot of the stuff, it's the ceilings are not very high, and the shelves are low, and you're kind of like, what the heck is this little teeny place? Because she was so tiny, they didn't build anything too high. But it's really cute, and they really fixed it up. I mean, it is pristine, and it's a museum, and there's a museum there, and you can go see all this, and you could buy bonnets. And it's wicked cool. So yeah, it's lovely, and you can go to their website and you can see their stuff. So there you are. That's on the way home, and it's weird, and it kind of makes me think like Rose is like really writing and describing things, and Laura's just kind of going, day 4, it was hot. But it's not fair because it was a diary that she never planned to have published, and here like Rose even admits she asked her about the trip, and she's like, it was horrible. Shut up. And that's like, so now I'm gonna publish a diary. So that was weird. This is just weird. I don't know. People are like, oh, you should read on the way home. Why? It's odd. It is an odd book, but it's very historic. It's very telling. So what the heck am I reading tomorrow? What the heck am I reading tomorrow? Tomorrow is, what am I doing? It's Wednesday. So tomorrow's the 5th. Oh my. Okay, so that'll be fun. So I'll think of something. I've been threatening to read a Bill Anderson book. Here, I'm like leaning out of shot here. Can I do that? I can, yes. Here, yes. So I have been threatening to read Laura Ingalls Wilder, a biography by William Anderson. And that sounds like it would be boring, but William Anderson can really, he can write. And he's a clever sort, and he's not boring. He makes it work. So yeah, okay, blah 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 blah. So yeah, he has maps and things and pictures, and he describes things, and he has and there's like poems and songs, and he talked. So it's kind of cool. We'll see what we can do with that. We'll see if we can do some Laura Ingalls Wilder by Bill Anderson. And I don't know, some of you may have met him if you ever went to some of our events that we've done, those prairie events in Walnut Grove or in Mansfield, Missouri, or wherever. Bill Anderson's often there, signing autographs and whatnot, and speaking. And he's very cool. And he's a very nice man. Very nice man. And he doesn't just write about Little House. He actually wrote all about the people, the Von Trapps, the people in The Sound of Music, and tons of other things. But he's way into lore. It is pretty good. Like I said, he's not boring. He manages to make... He's a history teacher. He manages to make dull things very exciting because he's a teacher and he knows how to do it. So, we will do it. We'll do it. We'll have a go with the Bill Anderson book tomorrow. So, thank you so much. And I'm so glad it's Chocolate Chip Cookie Day. And, I will see you tomorrow. And thank you, Cindy. Cindy keeps posting August 6th, right over there. We'll be having the show. So, I'll see you tomorrow. And, now, we'll start Bill's book. I might not read on Thursday. Because I have to do the show like that afternoon. I have to redo the whole living room thing. Maybe. Or I'll like change the time or something. But we'll certainly be reading. Worst case scenario, I might not read Thursday. Or I'll read Thursday and take Friday off. Or so I might take a day. But then I'll be totally back at it. Because I'll like read all week. Because I like it. Because I like doing this. It's crazy. So see you tomorrow. Wash your hands. Wear your mask. Take care. And see you tomorrow. Bye.